So my job now is to sort of be the junior Moses and introduce the other folks who are going to be speaking. So first up, we have Albert Schultz. You probably know of his work at Soulpepper. He's the founding artistic director. He also runs the Academy. And he has some awesome news, actually, about what happened from the Academy all the way through his, to network broadcast television. So, Albert, please join us. Here's the clicker.
There's the clicker. Whoa. Hi. Oh, great. Okay. Wow. How's this work? What's up there? Like that. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Albert. As John said, thank you, John. I am the artistic director. Look at me. I'm already wrecking the joint. I'm the artistic director of Soulpepper Theater Company. Now, let me explain just really quickly what that means. I'm someone, one of a group of colleagues across the country who run institutions whose job is to share with Canadians the art of theater, while at the same time giving a social capital offering. In other words, we're going to make sure that when you give money to a theater company, you're also aware that they're doing work in the community with young people, or they're inviting new Canadian families in. You know, they're doing charitable work. And they're presenting artistic offerings in a season of plays. And that's essentially what we do. The way we run our business, our revenue streams come from three sources. We're a not-for-profit organization. So what we do is we get money from government grants, we get money from private sector investment, and we get money from earned revenues, otherwise known as bums and seats. So the usual is a sort of 30-30-30 breakdown within those. A third, a third, a third. Sorry, we left 10 out. A third, a third, a third between those three pillars. Now I think so that's the business I'm in, and I run one called Soulpepper. And I think the reason I've been invited here, and particularly I know the reason I'm with NewCo, is that I've changed a whole bunch of things about it as I went. Things that didn't make sense to me, I just changed. And the result of that is, I think, why I'm here. Because some of the results is, first of all, that third is very different with us. We get 40% from bums and seats. We get only 10% from government support. And we get 50% from private sector investment. So how do we do that? Well, I don't know how we do it, except to say we have ideas and we ask for money to support them. And those ideas all have a bit of social capital in them. I can also tell you that this company's earned revenues, when our entire industry of not-for-profit theaters has shrunk over the last decade between 25 and 60%, in that same period of shrinking everywhere else, Soulpepper's earned revenues have grown by 348%. I also know that organizationally, when every other company has shrunk by up to 40%, in terms of the amount of work they're giving to artists, the amount of social capital they're work doing in the community. They've shrunk their organizations by usually around 25 to 40%. Our organization in the same decade has grown by 800%. And we've done this with the same model of three sources of revenue, but we've shifted things up. So that's our logo. Okay, what else do we have to say? Well, we've done it by disrupting the way the model works. The first thing I want to say is what's really important to these two guiding principles. Now, a lot of what I'm talking about as my discoveries are actually rather obvious. Because right here you can see our two guiding goals are giving meaningful creative employment to the largest community of artists possible. In other words, if I want my company to grow, I want to make sure that artists are working. That's why I exist. So let's make more artists work, and we're doing more. That should be the goal of every arts institution. Secondly, meaningful creative engagement with you. And engagement happens both in an artistic experience, we're sharing a narrative, and that's changing our molecular structure, while at the same time, I might be doing something in your community that you really want to support. So that meaningful creative engagement that can reach as many people as possible. Those are the two things. Give work to artists and change your community, and change in both areas as much as you can. Well, sadly, this has not been everyone's goals. So I want to show you this basic, going back to what a not-for-profit theater usually does, and every community has one. All the major theaters across the country are one of these models. And what they do essentially is they say, okay, we have 6 offerings this year. We have an offering from the fall to May. We're going to do 2 small shows with 2 actors in each, and we're going to do 2 medium-sized shows, and we're going to have 5 actors in each of those, and then we're going to really splurge, and we're going to do 2 shows, and we're going to have big casts, and our audience are going to love that. We're going to mix that all up in the season, and we're going to send those 6 widgets into the marketplace. And they'll all be coming one after another, and they will, from an inventory point of view, they will look like this. They will be identical. No matter whether I have 2 people on stage or whether I have 20 people on stage in an orchestra, I'm going to give the exact amount of inventory. This is the way the business works. Our May show has 4 weeks of 8 performances and 600 seats. That's the inventory. Doesn't make a lot of sense. I can't think of any other business that does this, but we do this in the theater. Then what we do is we get a result. And this is a kind of a predictable result that happens, and you can see that that show that's 30%, well, that's a disappointment. But it was only 5 people in that show. But that show that did 35% on the far right there, that's the one we had 20 people on stage. Oh my God, we want to slit our wrists. And at the end, when we do a post-mortem on this, we look at the things where the sad faces are. Those are the things, when I say we, my industry, looks at those and says, what do we do about these? And they look at the bottom line and they say, we're falling behind. So they realize that they have to do something. So the first thing they do is they throw all those widgets out every single year. After they've invested in 6 shows, they take all of those shows and they throw them out and they say, how are we going to make it differently to make up for our loss from last year? Well, this idea, as you can see, is blocking everything and it's broken. So just like it's true that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I say if it is broke, for God's sake, fix it. So here's what they do, though. When they have their problem, they bring in the big thinkers. Those quotation marks are intentional and ironic. And the big thinkers are usually the administrators, particularly the CFO, and the members of the board who are going to do big organizational thinking on this. And those board members are usually, and I love volunteers, but usually the people they bring in for these discussions are bank managers, insurance executives, accountants, and lawyers, all of whom are risk averse, and all of whom are looking at a cost-based model and coming up with a really obvious solution. And the question they ask is, here's the question. What are we going to do? What is our creative solution to this problem that we're losing space for all these creative types to work? So what are we going to do? What creative solution are we going to find to keep all these creative people working? And all those big thinkers sit around, they come up with an amazingly creative solution. The solution, they cut costs. And they cut costs in 3 ways. Remember those 2 shows that were 20? They make those shows 10. So now you've saved a lot of money because you're not hiring those 10 actors for those 2 shows. And then they take one of those 5s and they reduce it to 2. Great. Then the next thing they do is they say, how many weeks did you rehearse last year on all your shows? 4 weeks. Make it 3 weeks this year. And you think I'm kidding. What has happened over the last 10 years is the average rehearsal period for an offering that you're still paying more money for used to be 4 weeks. It's now often 2 to 2.5 weeks from first day of rehearsal to you coming. What does this do to the value proposition, not only of that theater, but of the entire industry, if when you go to the theater, you're seeing undercooked work? It's not, when at home, you can watch Happy Valley or Breaking Bad and go, every episode is pretty great. The theater, it's a bit hit and miss. We've attacked the value proposition. And then the other thing they do is they go, let's cut the social capital stuff, because that has no returnable revenues right away. We're not selling tickets to those things we're doing for the kids. So they cut that piece down as well. All right? And what happened is in that whole discussion, trying to find a creative solution to have a place for creative people, the one person they never invited into that discussion was the creative person who they employ. They never have asked the artist into that discussion. At Soulpepper, and remember our statistics, at Soulpepper, you can see at the bottom there, the artists are the spine of everything we do. And our organization over the last 10 years has become a new co. It didn't start as we started 18 years ago on that old model. In the last 10 years, we've become a new co. And we started with a spine of artists in the middle. And we stack a series of mission platforms, the first one being community. That's where all the social capital lives. The next one is the future. That's all our training of artists. That's also where social capital lives, but it's also going to help our value proposition. Then the next one, the pipeline, is all about R&D. What are we doing to make sure that we're creating work in the future that is innovative, that grabs an audience, and if we put it into an innovation space, if we're making new original work, it also becomes something that I call is in the ownership space. And anything that's in the ownership space is in the exploitation space. And if you can exploit a work of art, you free the artists themselves. Yeah? So the next piece up is the stage. That's what you see when you go to Soulpepper. You go to see a show, and you think, oh, this is fantastic. And all that stuff is underneath. But then there's a bunch of stuff above that. The next is on the road. Once we've done it in Toronto, who else wants to see it? Who else in Ontario wants to see it? Who else in Canada wants to see it? Who else outside of Canada wants to see it? And how can we take that to them? And then the last piece is, as we grow up, is digital and broadcast dissemination. And if we can get all of those going, and I'm telling you right now at Soulpepper, all of that is going, we're completely subverting the model. So the big disruptors we're putting in are in these three areas. So when others cut back on their social capital and reduced the size of the shows we're doing and reduced the number of artists they're employing, Soulpepper did quite the opposite. Over the last 10 years, while everyone else did those shrinkings, we took, for instance, we started a training program where instead of asking people, and in my opinion, it's the best training program in the country. I'm biased, but the results will bear it out. But here's the thing, a training program that good in New York will cost you $50,000 a year. At Soulpepper, we give you $30,000 to train. Wait a minute, that's crazy! That's an $80,000 deficit. They would pay, but now you're paying them. No one's thinking. Okay, hold on to that thought. Then the next thing we look at is R&D, and this thing I said about the new space. I can put on a production, and we have a very successful production of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, and people can come see it and like it. But I can't then decide on my own, great, thanks, Arthur. I'm going to now turn this into a movie, and I'm going to make a cartoon series out of it, Willie Loman on a tricycle. It's going to be fantastic. I don't have the right to do that. But if I invent a piece of theater with my team, I can do whatever the heck I want. I can take that right up the thing. Social capital, we took our social capital spend, that non-revenue generating spend, because we're not seeing dollars come in at the box office, and instead of cutting it in half, which everyone else did, we multiplied our spend over the last 10 years by 10 times. That's crazy too, except our private sector, people say, how does Albert Schultz is so good at raising money? No. I will tell you, I'm not good at raising money. What I'm good at is coming up with things to sell. And if you come up with things to sell in the sphere of social capital, that's when the private sector investors come in. In the last 10 years, in the private sector alone, I've raised $60 million against social capital investments. In the last year alone, I've raised $15 million against those. None of those have a play attached to them. These are all social capital investments. And I'm about to go into a campaign where I'm going to raise 50 over the next 4 years, and I'm telling you we'll get it, because we're going to build it on these ideas. Now, the last piece is the inventory management piece. Inventory management is if you've got a show, instead of worrying about the one that sold, that didn't sell, take the one that did sell and keep it alive. Keep it alive. So, we've done that. I'm going the wrong way. What's going on? How's this? There we go. Here we go. So, really quickly, I'm going to give you a 30-second rundown. Mike Ross on the left, amazing composer in our building, works full-time in our building. I threw a book of poems called the Spoon River Anthology by Edgar Lee Masters in front of him, a 100-year-old book of poems. I said, have you read this? He said, no. I said, do. Next day, he brought in 2 amazing songs. 2 years later, after 2 years of development, we created a new musical that won every award in Toronto as the best new musical, et cetera, is now going to run for the entire summer at the Charlottetown Festival. It has been invited to a major theater in Washington, D.C. next year, our production, which we're going to go set on that company, and we are going to take it all over the place, and we're bringing it back to Soulpepper for the 4th time this winter, and we created an audio recording of it, which is about to win a silver medal in the most prestigious audio the New York Radio Festival in just a couple of days. So our first piece so that's digitizing something that already exists. You can go, in fact, online and get it yourself. Go into soulpepper.ca and download it. You'll hear the whole show. That piece has gone crazy. Ken McKenzie, you saw with him, helped design an immersive experience for that. These 5 artists who I love, I said, you know what? I want you guys to get in a room and just play together and make something. They said, great idea. They got in a room, they couldn't make a decision. They came back to me 24 hours later. They said, can you just tell us what to make? So in that case, I threw Dennis Lee's Alligator Pie in front of them. Alligator Pie landed on the table. Great. They went into a room. 3 weeks later, they came up with a show that has now toured the country. It's come back, and we have 2 of the largest digital platforms in the world now vying to develop it into a series with these 5 artists that, again, will be a Soulpepper property. This piece, Kim's Convenience, the man on the left, Ince Choi, a student of the Soulpepper Academy. While he's there, writes a play, takes this play. This play is a huge hit. We build a production around it. It's now played in 6 different runs in Toronto. We've taken it to every major center across the country. We continue to tour it. It's going with us to New York next year. And as mentioned earlier by John, and by the way, Wayne Mengesha directed it, and these are our design team. What I should tell you before I go to the next slide is that these are the 3 great examples of projects that are being exploited. Every single face that you've seen on here is one of those artists who I paid to train. Remember that crazy idea? So taking Ince Choi and Kim's Convenience, and you imagine he's in the community of artists, he's one of our resident artists. He came to our Future program, he trained at the Soulpepper Academy. We helped him develop Kim's Convenience. We took it to the stage, we took it to the road, and next week we go into principal photography with the CBC on a show that will land in your living room on October 4th, the first time in God knows how long if this has ever happened. 2 series, 2 years ordered up without a pilot. Never happens. A Soulpepper show by Ince Choi of Kim's Convenience on your national broadcaster. So that you will see these people. Isn't that something? So in closing, I'm going to go back to my 2 guiding principles and just give you stats again to close. And I hope that those of you who listen to this think, okay, let's make sure that if an industry is doing something that doesn't make sense to me, I'm encouraging you please to ask some questions and follow your doubts. Because meaningful creative employment, if we take the FTE, meaning the full-time equivalency that is given to an artist by any of the organizations that I've talked about, the other organizations in the old model, in this city alone, you can take any 6 others, any 6, and they will not reach the FTE of the Soulpepper Theatre Company. We give more work to more Canadian artists than any other 6 in this community. Most organizations, major organizations across this city, have a full-time equivalency for artist employment of between 5 and 7. We do 45 and counting, okay? With not that much bigger a budget, with a 20% increase in budget. The last piece is the meaningful creative engagement. 4 seconds left. Next year, Soulpepper's work will be seen by 13.5 million people on a budget of $12 million, which means we're delivering to you a piece of our story for $1 to deliver to you as a Canadian. Every other organization in the country is spending $100 to reach 1 person. We'll also be in 130,000 seats in Toronto, 100,000 across the country in various theaters, and 20,000 people in New York City are going to watch all of the shows that you've just seen and 5 more in a month-long sit-down festival of Soulpepper's work representing Canada in our sesquicentennial on 42nd Street next year. We want to see you there. Thank you so much.